I cannot believe these 5 differentials aren't being talked about more as we head into game week 19. Hey everyone, Sam here, otherwise known as FPL Pricey. Today we're going to take a look at 5 key differentials that are going to help you rise up the ranks ahead of the festive period. Now, full disclosure, because it's the Christmas period, I'm recording this before some of the game week 18 fixtures have taken place. So if any of these players get injured, then please do keep that in mind, that I recorded it on the Friday rather than the Saturday after the matches. There will be another video coming later this week, so don't worry, but that'll be more of a team selection video. So I'll address any injuries to key players then if I get the chance to. In the meantime though, let's take a look at these 5 key differentials. And the first one I want to mention today is Martin Ødegaard. He's by far the most highly owned of the 5 players I'm going to talk about today. So don't worry, they get more and more differential as we go. But Martin Ødegaard, even though he's 15% owned, I'm yet to see him in any team that's still active in FPL at this point. I think those 15% of FPL managers very much are dead teams on the majority. So I think that 14.6% is actually a lot lower amongst the active managers and in the higher ranks. Now, there's a few reasons I'm recommending Martin Ødegaard so highly today. The first being, in all of his last 4 matches, he's got an XGI of over 0.5. So despite the fact that the data on screen across the season has been good, but maybe not electric, Martin Ødegaard recently has started getting himself into really good positions around the edge of the box, making late runs and also taking the shots when he's needed to. So those last 4 matches, he's actually been really unlucky not to get more returns than he has, all of which he's got an XGI of over 0.5. So you'd expect a goal or an assist every other game from that sort of data. The way Arsenal are playing recently as well has they've really started to let the foot off of the brake at the moment, and they're really starting to attack with a lot more verve than they were at the start of the season. And Martin Ødegaard, since injury, coming back into the side, has looked right on it, and I think he's a key reason why Arsenal have started to get that uptick in their attacking data. Now, the data is increasing week on week. The fixtures also, if we look at the bottom of the screen, are really favourable after game week 18 is out of the way against Liverpool. The next 4, all green on the ticker: West Ham, Fulham, Crystal Palace and Nottingham Forest, all fantastic fixtures. And when we take a look at the way our teams are going to be structured over the next few game weeks, I think he's going to be progressively easier to get into our side, especially around game week 21, when Salah and Son will both be exiting a lot of our teams due to AFCON and the Asia Cup. Now, at that moment, we're going to have to consider which options we're going to be bringing in instead of them as placeholders for a few game weeks. And I think Martin Ødegaard could be the perfect candidate for that position. He is still very differential amongst the engaged managers. So if you want to get on him now before other people do, you will get the benefit of most of his points for the next couple of game weeks before the masses start to clock on to just how good of an FPL asset he's going to be around game week 21 and beyond. So let's round off the Arsenal loving before we move on to some of the other differentials. And Gabriel Jesus is probably being overlooked by way too managers at the moment as well. 5.1% owned is very, very low for a player with this sort of underlying data. He's got an XG alone of nearly 0.5. And since he's come back from injury as well, 4 out of the 5 games he's played in, he's had an XGI of over 0.5 as well. So his data is absolutely fantastic. I'm really surprised that when Haaland got injured, not more managers were having a look at Gabriel Jesus. And again, because we've already discussed the fixtures, I'm not going to go into it again. But those next 4 after Liverpool in game week 18 are looking absolutely fantastic. So if we think Haaland is still going to be out in game week 19, if you've got Darwin in your side like I do, if you're playing a 3-4-3, so you've got Watkins, you've got Solanke, and you're thinking who's that third striker going to be, or if you fancy him above an Ollie Watkins or a Dominic Solanke, by the way, Jesus has got very comparable, if not better data than both of those players, then he could be a fantastic differential in an elite team that has really started to find their attacking verve, as I mentioned with Martin Ødegaard. So I think if you're not fully convinced on Ødegaard and you've got those positions taken up in midfield, then perhaps Gabriel Jesus could be the player to go for. Now, before I move on, one other player that I did think about having a look at today was Kai Havertz. His data has also been fantastic recently, and again, he could be a really good midfielder differential that you could be having a look at. I think for me, I just want to see a couple more game weeks before I'm fully convinced in how he's going to operate in that number 8 role on the left-hand side, but he has looked really good, and I'd definitely not be putting anyone off having a look at him as well as an alternative to Ødegaard. Another player I think is being significantly overlooked at the moment is Pascal Gross at Brighton. Now, 3.2% ownership, it's getting more and more differential at this stage as well. 6.4 million is very cheap for a player who is putting up these sort of numbers recently. Now, just to put it into context, in 5 of his last 6 games, he's gotten over 0.5 XGI. So again, for a midfielder, that's fantastic. He's also gotten 6 attacking returns in his last 6 games as well, so he's in great form. And in a period where Brighton have been rotating a lot, and even during this entire season they've been rotating a lot, by the way, it's very hard to pick a Brighton asset that you can rely on week in, week out. Pascal Gross in the last 6 game weeks has played a full 90 in 5 of the last 6, getting 33 off the bench, I think 3 or 4 weeks ago. That was the only one he's missed any minutes in the last 6 game weeks, and that has been a very congested fixture period as well. So I think a lot of us have been very worried and frustrated with Brighton assets. I think we've been worried because we don't know when they're going to start, whether they're going to get rotated. Even Mitoma has been rotated at really annoying moments against good teams that we want to be targeting. Whereas Pascal Gross has been playing against all of them and been getting 90 minutes in the lot of them as well. So this is a guy that over the next few game weeks, yes, on paper the next 2 are yellow, are middling on the fixture ticker, but I expect Brighton to score in both of those games. And then beyond that, all the way through to game week 23, absolutely fantastic. In fact, I think the fixtures go all the way up to game week 28 for Brighton as well. So you could be very tempted to look at a Brighton asset. However, Mitoma, probably the classic asset that we're all always keen on, is off at the Asia Cup after game week 21. So Pascal Gross at the same price, 3.2% ownership, incredibly differential, could be the ideal replacement or that ideal differential to tap into that Brighton underlying data. And I think his data is going to get better and better week in, week out, because they're starting to use him in a much more attacking role and they're getting the best out of him, as we've seen from that underlying data last 5 out of this last 6 game weeks, over 0.5 XGI. So this is a guy bang in form, 6 returns in the last 6, great underlying data and great fixtures to come. So honestly, I don't think I could recommend him much higher than I am doing right now. The penultimate player I want to talk about today is Dejan Kulusevski. And again, he's a player that has been overlooked with good reason for the majority of the season so far. As you can see on screen, the underlying attacking data across the season hasn't been fantastic, but crucially, he's moved to a more central midfield role, so more of a CAM role rather than his right wing traditional role in the last 2 matches. Now, in those 2 matches, in both of them, he's posted an XGI of over 0.75, which is absolutely elite numbers. So yes, it's a short sample size, but if he continues in that role, this is a player that is going to keep getting those attacking returns. And with players around him of such high quality, I expect those attacking returns to increase, especially in the assists, which have been lacking so far this season. Now, crucially, with Tottenham assets, there are 2 factors to take into account here. Now, number 1 is the fact that Son Heung-min will go off to the Asia Cup in game week 21, which is just 2 game weeks away from where we are at the moment. So on screen, we've got game week 19 onwards, disregarding game week 18. So game week 19 onwards, Brighton, Bournemouth, Man United in game week 21, and then afterwards, Brentford, Everton. And although it won't show on the ticker, Their hardest fixture on paper, all the way through to game week 33, is that Man United away game in game week 21. And I think we can all agree that none of us would actually see that as a particularly ridiculously tough fixture at this point in time. So I'd expect attacking return potential in all of those games, not just for the short term, but all the way through to game week 33, when I think they go up against Newcastle away from home, and that is when the fixtures really turn for them. So especially with Son going off to the Asia Cup in game week 21, yes, that might hamper them slightly from an attacking point of view, but a lot of us will be looking at a Spurs asset to replace Son. So you could be looking at Richarlison, but I think he's going to be talked about a lot. If you want to go slightly differential, Kulusevski keeps getting the minutes. He's being used in a much more attacking role at the moment. And again, under 5% ownership could be a really easy way to climb up the ranks if other people don't clock onto him. So again, a player I'm highly recommending today, Dejan Kulusevski. Watch out, because his ownership is going to rise in the next few game weeks. So if you really want to jump the gun and get ahead of your rivals in FPL at the moment, then can I tempt you in Christopher Nkunku? Now, he hasn't played a minute of Premier League football so far, so it is a punt. There is no question about it. This is a risky one. But given the quality that Nkunku possesses, 7.3 for a forward of his ability is absolutely ludicrous. And he's been injured all season so far. We haven't been able to see him in the Premier League. But given the data that we can take a look at beyond that, over the last 365 days, for example, he's got an XG per 90 of 0.69 and an XA per 90 of 0.31. So overall, he's getting an XGI per 90 of 1. So an attacking return on average is expected every single game that Nkunku plays in, which again is absolutely ridiculous. He's a very, very good striker. And I think Chelsea, more than most teams at the moment, need a really high quality finisher. Nkunku is definitely of that caliber. All we need from him is to stay fit. If he can stay fit, if he starts matches, then he is going to be elite in FPL. And I think 1.5% ownership is going to be laughable in a few game weeks time if he can get himself into the starting 11 soon and build up the match fitness to a point where we're not worried about him getting injured again. Because full disclosure, if he gets injured in game week 18, I wouldn't be massively surprised, because they're bringing him back in after quite a long layoff. And who knows? It's difficult to predict whether a player will react well to that or react poorly to that. So I think one advantage of filming this video now is I'm looking at game week 19 onwards. So what we'll see from game week 18 is whether or not he starts the game, whether or not he gets good minutes. Maybe he comes off the bench in game week 18 and gets a few minutes at the end, perhaps 30 towards the end of the match to build up the fitness. And then by game week 19, he could be a prime candidate for a forward spot. So as I mentioned, it is risky, but at least we'll know how he looks after game week 18, and the fixtures all the way through to game week 23, with the exception of Liverpool away from home in game week 22, are looking really, really encouraging for him. So again, another massive differential that if you hop on him now, if you take that risk on his fitness, on his minutes, then he could be fantastic value for money, and you're going to get him at a cheaper price than everyone else will, and at a more differential ownership. So you'll get the benefit of all of his points, whereas by the time most other people clock onto him, they're probably going to get him at 15, 20% owned, whereas you've got him at 2% and you've got the benefit of the first couple of game weeks with him. The other thing to mention is, yes, Cole Palmer has been on penalties so far this season, and I think it is likely that he keeps them for the foreseeable, but Nkunku could take the penalties away from him at some point this season if Palmer owners are a little bit unlucky. So that is another factor to consider. He might eventually take penalties away. So I think that that's just another string to his bow that I'd probably keep in the back of my mind in case he does start taking them at some point later this season. Nkunku, I think, is a great option. 7.3 million. very differential. It's just a risk on the minute. So if you're brave enough, maybe he could be for you. So there you have it, 5 key differentials to help you rise up the ranks ahead of game week 19 and over the next few game weeks. In the meantime, if there are any players that I haven't talked about today that you'd like me to mention, then please do leave them in the comments below and we can have a chat about them over the next few days before the deadline for game week 19. I've also got my team selection video coming for game week 19 on Christmas Eve, I believe, of all days. So if you could leave a like on this video and subscribe to the channel to make sure that you don't miss out on any future content, then that would be absolutely fantastic. However, for now, I wish you all the best ahead of game week 19, and if you celebrate it, a very Merry Christmas from me.